Working within an application uses the basic interface components and skills we've already discussed, such as toolbars, the ribbon, and menus, as well as mouse and keyboard skills for moving, typing, and selecting. The specific methods and skills used within a specific application are something to be covered in a course on that application, but some universal skills are appropriate for us now. One of those is the process of saving files. Saving of files is the process of moving the file and its contents to storage as opposed to memory. Storage is intended to be persistent instead of volatile, or permanent instead of temporary. When we first start working, let's say that we are typing something into WordPad, Notepad, or Microsoft Word. Until we actually save it, all of that information is just being held in RAM memory, which is temporary. If the computer were to go off all of a sudden, we might lose all of the work that we had. Fortunately, when we save a file, we're going to move that information to a permanent location, or at least a more persistent and stable place, instead of leaving it in that RAM memory where it's in a little bit of peril if something bad goes on. Regardless of the application, saving always requires three basic things: a location to which you're going to save, a file name for the specific file, and a file type. When you choose a location, you're going to choose a storage device. Now this could be the hard drive inside the CPU. It could be a USB drive that you put into a USB port on your computer. It could be a CD or DVD if they are burnable or recordable. It also could include things like a network drive or an external hard drive. But there has to be some type of physical hardware device to which you are storing the information. In addition, all of these different devices may have something called folders. So you need to choose the folder to which you want to save it as well. The file type is normally defined by the default for the program. For example, if I'm working in Microsoft Word, by default it wants to save it as a Microsoft Word file. But some programs allow you to save into different formats. Microsoft Word is one of those examples. I can save it as a Word file, or I can save it as something known as rich text, or even something called plain text. Rich text allows me to have things like colors and different fonts and bolding and bullet points. Plain text is just like a typewriter. Why would I want to save it to one of these other formats? Well, because I might have Microsoft Word, but not everybody in the world does. So to make it more accessible, or in other words, so I can share the file with other people, I might go ahead and save it as a rich text file. That means that most people with some type of word processor that was created in the last decade or so will be able to read that file, and it also keeps it with all the interesting stuff. The bolding, italics, colors, and bullet points that make it interesting and easier to read. If I wanted to ensure that absolutely anybody with a computer could read it, then I would save it as plain text. Plain text does not support different fonts. It doesn't support features like making it bold or italics, and it doesn't support bullet points. It just has the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and different symbols that you can type on a keyboard. But plain text can be read by virtually any computer. So even though I'm using a specific program, in this example Microsoft Word, there are 3, and actually there's many more different types of formats that I can save it into. When I save the file is when I will determine which type of format I want to save it into. When we go to save a file, though, there are certain rules that we have to follow about naming. First of all, names can be up to 255 characters long. But let me caution you a little bit. Please don't use all 255 characters. First of all, there are some technical reasons why you shouldn't do it, but for our purposes, it just makes things too long. Now, technically speaking, I could call something I created in WordPad the file that I created while taking my course on Personal Computer Fundamentals with Aaron Olson on 2010, whatever it is. That name is technically legal, but it's way too long. It gets to be cumbersome. But we also don't have to be short and cryptic like we did in the old days. When we had DOS, we had a limitation to how many characters we could have, and that meant we have to be kind of cryptic and abbreviate things. With 255 characters, you can be descriptive, but you don't want to go overboard. You also can include any type of alphanumerics, in other words, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and you can include some symbols. I recommend that you do not use symbols at all, but you definitely, on a Windows environment, can't use the slash, the backslash, the pipe, the colon, the asterisk, the question mark, the angle brackets, or a quotation mark. Those particular symbols have meanings to computers, so if you were to put it as part of a file name, the computer would get confused when it kind of put it in with all the rest of the information that it needs to process. So alphanumerics are fine. Symbols other than ones I've specifically listed here could be used, but I recommend that you just stick with ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and that way you'll be sure that your file names are good on any computer system, even those that aren't your own. Technically speaking, file names can have spaces. Once again, though, I'm going to recommend that they do not. Now, I'm a little inconsistent. When I create folders, I do often put spaces in folders, but with file names, I tend to just keep them out. Since not having spaces can make it hard to read, I want to talk a little bit about using capital and lowercase letters. In Windows, it is case retentive, but not case sensitive. That means if you type certain letters in uppercase, it will remember them. For example, if I type my file with a capital M and a capital F, that's the way it will appear. So it is case retentive. But it is not case sensitive, meaning if I ever went to search for a file called my file, I could type it in any way I want, in all uppercase letters, all lowercase letters, or mixed case. And regardless of how I typed it, Windows would be able to find the file. What we have to remember, though, is that we can't have different versions of it within the same location. In other words, I can't have my file with a capital M and a capital F and my file in all lowercase in the same location if it's the same file type. All of those rules are kind of about the first name, and now I want to talk about the file name extension. Names have a 3 or 4 letter extension on the end of them. Depending on how your computer is set up, you may or may not always see this extension. This extension identifies something known as the authoring application. In other words, which program created it. Was it Notepad, was it WordPad, or was it Microsoft Word? The computer needs to know this because when you go to open the file, it needs to know which application it should use to open it. You should not change the last name. Now trust me, you have 255 characters for the first name. You really don't need to be messing with the last 3 or 4 letters. People that do that tend to have worked with computers in DOS, and in trying to get a few extra letters out of DOS, they would mess with the last name. We're not going to do that though, because if you mess with the last name, it confuses the computer. If I put a .erin at the end of every file I created so I could identify it as my own, and then I double-clicked on it, the computer would go, huh? I have no idea what a .erin file is. Either it wouldn't be able to open it all, or every time I went to open the file, it would give me a little window that says, I'm confused. I don't know what to open this with. Can you please tell me which application I need? Trust me, that's way more work than it's worth. So as a review, we want to keep our file names simple but descriptive, so they're easy to identify by just looking at the name, but not too lengthy. We do not want to change the file name extension, the part that comes after the period. File names are really like our first and last names. The last name identifies us as part of a family. So if I'm in a whole group of people and they're saying, excuse me, but which family do you belong to? I can say, well, I'm an Olson, and that way they kind of know what family group to put me in. The same is true with computer files. When I have a .doc file, my computer knows that that's a Microsoft Word document. If I have a .xls file, it knows it belongs to Microsoft Excel and so forth. The first name, on the other hand, identifies us as an individual. So I may be an Olson, but I'm also an Aaron. Now we can have more than one person named Susan, for example, but usually not in the same family. The reason I bring this up is because I can have a Word document called Budget 2010, and I can also have an Excel document called Budget 2010. Even though they both have the same first name, Budget 2010, the computer knows that one is a Word file and one is an Excel file because of the extension. One ends in .doc and one ends in .xls. So on a PC, we can have more than one file with the same file name, but it can't have the same first and last name and be in the same location. If it has the same first name, like my Budget 2010, but a different last name, then both of those can reside in the same location. It's the whole name being the same that can't be stored within the same location. In this case, we're talking